You're watching the Pennsylvania Roller Coaster Club on YouTube.
Hello, hello, hello. And thank you so much for joining us again for our second iteration and the first that we call the PaRC After Dark. So our intention are to be able to release some videos later in the evening for people that are night owls. Obviously, they can still be watched the second day, or the third day, or the 100th day for that matter. Heck, put it on repeat. That would be good. But in all seriousness, the other one, the roundtable talks, we are really going to try to focus on getting multiple users, where to give a little further explanation, these PaRC After Dark are typically going to be just with two of us to be able to really engage and go back and forth and see if we can solve the world's problems in roughly 30 to 45 minutes. And tonight, I am pretty excited because my co-host and my partner in crime is Jake from Jake Coasters. Jake, great to see you, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. This gives us an opportunity to be able to take some of those conversations and the discourse that we have in X and be able to continue them in a little bit more of a lengthy format, which I think is good. So today, our topic, which Jake really doesn't know, he's going to learn it for the first time.
I'm waiting to hear what this topic is.
The merger. Let's look at it after the fact. And now that the dust has settled, the fog has cleared a little bit. Where do we stand? What do we think is going to happen with these parks? What is going to happen with all these rides? I think there are several distinct possibilities and options. And tonight, we're going to do our best to talk about them all. So, Jake, just right off the top, what are your initial thoughts? If you had to give it just a pass-fail grade, where do you sit today?
That's a really great question. I, like most people, were really taken aback by the sudden and just I would say, just kind of the nonchalant closing of Kingda Ka. It was something that has kind of stuck with me the last couple of weeks because I never would have expected that to just shut down. It's not like it had the same accident as Dragster or anything like that. And I think it says more about the company as a whole rather than anything about the ride and how it was, operating. Because as far as I know, Kingda Ka could have ran, if they scheduled out the maintenance, it could have ran for a whole other season. So at the moment, I am a little bit nervous with, the future of, every coaster at the Six Flags and old legacy Cedar Fair chains. Obviously, I'm not talking about Top Thrill 2 because that's its own set of problems, but just seeing kind of how they treated Kingda Ka, obviously an iconic coaster that really did break a lot of barriers for coasters and really did kind of signal the top end of the coaster wars. To see that kind of just oh, by the way, we're closing this, just whatever. That kind of was a little troubling to me. Perhaps I'm looking too much into it, but yeah, that really kind of set the new temperature, I think, because that felt like that was the first real decision by this new merged Six Flags and Cedar Fair chain. So
now you said something interesting that I want to do a little clip it and bring us back. Jump in the way back time machine if we can. Going to go ahead and set it to all of about a minute and a half ago. And you had mentioned you kind of take it as an impression of the company as a whole. And I found that comment to be really interesting and intriguing because what is this company as a whole right now? Is this the company that a lot of people thought, which was going to be headed by Richard Zimmerman, and that these were going to be Cedar Fair-esque decisions? Or is this a company that still has Salim Basul with his little marionette strings over top of the Cedar Fair people? And
The premium himself.
yeah, you know what? I think a lot of people going into this were under the impression that Salim was going to be a figurehead, relatively powerless, and be pushed out the door.
Right.
I have a little bit of a newsflash for those people. That's not happening. Salim Basul is a very interesting guy. And I'll give you a real quick nickel tour of the history of Salim Basul. So Salim is actually, much like myself, he's an old pizza guy. Salim was on the forefront of incorporating technology into commercial kitchens. And he is a pretty brilliant businessman. He had taken a company that he had essentially saved, and one that he had founded, and made both of them multi-billion-dollar corporations on the backs of his hard work and decision making. And a lot of the things that are happening currently in these parks, they have a Salim Basul fingerprint all over them. The technology plans, it seems evident to me at this point that they're moving in the directions of the Six Flags technology. Um, and right, wrong, or indifferent, at least they're making a decision, and they're not going to, try to deal with two different pieces of technology for people to have to learn. I definitely think, again, right, wrong, or indifferent of which way they're choosing, going to one as quickly as possible is probably the right route. But the days of Richard Zimmerman making decisions about how to run parks on his own are over, because there's a board of directors to answer to at this point. And with Salim being the head of the board, he wields incredible influence over every single aspect of this company. So I don't think we can just boot Salim off to the side. I think that people need to get used to hearing that name and seeing him around, because I don't believe that he's leaving now. Not after this big of a win of actually securing the merger that in one way or another they had been attempting to pursue for a decade. So you finally get a guy in here that makes it happen. You get a guy who gets the deal done. You don't boot that guy out the door. That guy leaves when he says he leaves. That's how this works. So, it's either going to be the board and the shareholders that say, Salim, you failed, get out. But realistically, he's going to have another year or two to be able to prove that his ideology of where this company is going is valid. And then, obviously, if it's a couple years down the road, the stocks are struggling, the parks are struggling, he'll be out the door, just like everybody else. But I found that really interesting when you had mentioned that. What company are we looking at? Because I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I don't think for sure either.
I think it adds to another question of the similar ilk: is, are they a land development company? Are they a real estate company? Are they a food service company? Are they a hotel, amenity, and entertainment company? Or are they a parks and entertainment company? And when you try to put your hand in too many things, sometimes it distracts you from what the primary goal should be. Really, the only park that does this better than anyone in the country is Hershey. And Hershey does it so well, nobody knows what Hershey does. And that is the goal. That is the goal. When you go and visit Hershey Park, I would say 30% of every structure you drive past within a 7-mile radius is owned and operated by the Hershey Entertainment Corporation. From the dry cleaners to a gas station to multiple restaurants offsite, um, to hotels and condos to golf courses to you name it, they have their hand in it. And now Cedar Point, they do something similar, but Hershey only has Hershey to worry about. That's why Hershey can do that. The guy who is making the decisions for everything, he's in the same place. He doesn't have to get on a plane and fly to Charlotte and then fly to San Antonio and then to Los Angeles. And it's very easy to be able to manage it when everything is, it's tight, it's on site. But I think that they are just trying to be too many things right now. You look at everything that's happening at Great Adventure. We lost King to Cobb, but we gained a dozen luxury yurts. I mean, am I wrong? Is my impression wrong that we? I mean, I did we really trade King to Cobb for yurts? Is that what happened?
We traded it for something, that's for sure.
Yeah, traded it for something. That's
No,
and God
I
only knows
definitely,
what that's going to be.
right. I think so. The big problem with Six Flags in general, and this is where Cedar Fair kind of has a little bit of an edge, but Cedar Fair in some regards as well. With Six Flags, it's really the battle of legacy, right? So they have to determine which piece of their history they'd like to pursue for the future. So at the moment, it seems as if they are running after that resort strategy,
Yeah,
but they're doing it in a way that kind of negates who they were for the last, I'd say, 20 years or so, like since the Coaster Wars started. That's who they were. That was their bread and butter. So what they're doing now is they're kind of, by ripping out things like King Ka, and it sounds like Superman Escape from Krypton, and maybe X2 and stuff like that. By ripping those attractions out, what you're really doing is you're killing your legacy, but that might be intentional. It's very clear to me that they are very interested. And it's interesting that you bring up the food service, resort service, land thing,
yeah,
because with a well done theme park, all of those boxes need to be checked to be a successful resort destination. If you're just an amusement park that people come to for a day and then leave, that's one thing. But for all of those boxes to be checked, that takes a lot of work, and that takes a lot of restructuring, right? We've seen this happen
yeah.
with like Universal over the last couple of years. Since Harry Potter opened, really, they've done a whole lot of work to regain some of the lost legacy that they had, like back in the 90s. It takes a long time
That's a
to do
great
that.
point.
So the question is are we going to have like a United Park situation where the shareholders just get tired and keep cycling through, people? Or is somebody going to be able to come in, plant their flag down and say, this is what this company is, and not be necessarily worried about, us coaster people that, really appreciate and love the big record breakers, but say like, no, that's not really the direction that we're going on. So at the moment, I would say the biggest problem with Six Flags and Cedar Fair merger is them determining which legacy they'd like to chase after. Obviously Cedar Point is kind of outside a little bit of those parameters. But even Cedar Point is going to have to decide, what are we chasing after exactly? Who do we want to be? Do we want to be a Dollywood? Because that's going to be a lot of work for a lot of Six Flags parks. Or do we want to, just be a Six Flag park with a hotel? That just happens to be on one of the, most iconic coasters ever built. But, neither here nor there, right?
So that is interesting as well. Now, I actually think that what Six Flags is ties in more with just what Six Flags is, but what the industry, in their eyes, is projected to become over the next 5 to 10 years. And in doing so, I think we have to look at the entire picture of the industry. And we say, okay, if one of the possible strategies, which I think from the get-go was the most favored, if people were going to Vegas and had to bet which was going to happen, this would be the route. And that is that they would offshoot and sell a few parks and be able to pay down some debt and invest in the ones that they have. There was a problem with that from the rip. And I had shared this with a few people, and it never really started to catch on. But tell me if this makes sense. Who in the hell is going to buy your underperforming parks without you losing your ass on them? I mean, I am not the sharpest knife in the drawer, Jake, but I do know a little bit about business. And if you are selling something that is underperforming, the odds of you getting your value or even remotely close to your value back out of it is almost zero. Whereas if you're going to sell something that is profitable, that is good, that has growth and a future, now that is where you're going to get your money. So from the beginning, people have said they're going to sell some of the underscore parks, and I think that is going to be the case. But there's going to be one or two big ones that go to, because they have to be able to pair a big park with a couple underperformers to make that. Think about the crash in the economy back in 08, 09 from the housing crisis. A lot of that happened because mortgage companies were selling bulk. They were selling bulk mortgages in bundles. And you may have 18 out of 20 be great mortgages, but two of them, they were absolute what lenders and what finance people, we would call it pus. It was absolute pus. It was subprime, all garbage. So that's kind of the way that they're going to have to end up selling some of these underperforming parks. That is why this is option number one. Now, I brought up real estate company for a very specific reason, because I actually think that we're leaning more in this direction right now. Option number two, which is we look at the model that Richard Zimmerman had in terms of California's Great America, which was, let's go to a land developer, let's sell the property with a clause where we could buy back in at XYZ inflated rate, essentially creating yourself like a capital loan, just based off property. But I think it's a foregone conclusion that park is going to close, and that land is going to be redeveloped next to the stadium. But man, that's not the only one that is really in jeopardy of being redeveloped. And there are two parks in particular that are at the greatest risk. After a pretty lengthy and boring conversation about things that would interest almost no one, a friend of mine that currently works for JP Morgan, he had thrown a number out to me that sounded outlandish and crazy. He said $310 million. And I said, for what? And he told me Six Flags America. And I said, there's no way somebody's going to buy that park for $310 million. And he said, no, if it was redeveloped, that's what that land would be valued. You know, you're talking $310 million opposed to what is it worth right now with, rides in it. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a real estate developer. Even in my finance life, uh, I deal with money. I don't deal with development. That is a very different world, because if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to waste a lot of people's money, and you're going to end up being bankrupt in the end. And there's a lot of very intelligent companies that tried to get into this industry and never were able to stick around. Ask Marriott how difficult the theme park business can be. It's a bear, and these guys have to be able to make sure that they're maintaining profitability for all these parks. Uh, if you fall into another recession period, it's untenable. There's no way with this amount of parks that they would be able to take out any type of loan or get any type of capital to float them if something catastrophic would happen. I think ultimately the correct number is going to be 16 to 18 total properties. And I don't see him going much more than that. Which brings us to another set of these properties. Those are the ones that are owned by EPR. And I think that just as a whole, there is a huge misconception about several things within the leasing of these parks. Number one, Six Flags doesn't pay to put new rides into these parks. Now, they can contribute, and there are ways for that to take place, but the owner of the property is the one that is responsible for making additions, subtractions, what have you. Now, obviously, Six Flags and Cedar Fair historically have made requests, and that's kind of how that goes, but there's no guarantee that they are going to get what they want, or that they are going to consistently invest into these parks. It's just kind of like a little handshake deal. That being said, I can't foresee any of those EPR properties being a part of the new Six Flags moving forward. For one, Frontier City genuinely doesn't bring any value. Darien Lake, although I think it is a better park than a lot of people give it credit for, it also does not bring a ton of value. But I think those are both parks that could easily be sold. I think there would be buyers for those parks without having to, start including other things if they purchased them and tried to reflip them. I mean, there's so many moving parts with that, because of how those are written, and the clauses to be able to end them early on both sides. And historically, maybe 20 years ago, Jake, there were buyouts that were in those as well. I don't know if those exist anymore. I have no clue, but I would have to assume that if they were seriously interested in purchasing one of those, EPR would be more than happy to sell it. But I think there is a higher likelihood that they end up selling more property to EPR because they don't have a large buyer for multiple properties. I think that is a higher likelihood than Six Flags buying Darien Lake, buying Frontier City. So I think those are gone. I think California's Great America is gone. I think that what was the one that we were just discussing? Six Flags Great America. Six Flags America. That's the one I meant to say. That I think again, is going to be gone just due to the ability to develop all of that land in that area. I mean, you're talking about one of the most populated parts of our country where there is already a housing crisis and not enough places for people to live. And, in theory, yeah, great. Hey, have an amusement park. It's going to do really well. There's a lot of people that live there, but they're
There's a
still
lot of
so
people that
close.
live there.
Yeah,
They need
they're
places
still
to
so
stay.
close though to Hershey, to Great Adventure, to Busch Gardens, to King's Dominion. I mean, the competition that is there is
Right.
they would have to invest universal levels of money for 20 years to have that park be competitive with its competition surrounding it. So that's why you don't spend dead money. I We had mentioned it, the SLC getting redone. I don't know if that's really the right way to help that park. That move screams, absolutely screams, this isn't going to be here in 5 years. Kind of like how when they made the announcement of the deal for California, and then the next year they got a couple new flat rides. It's like, oh, I can't believe they're adding stuff. Maybe they're not getting rid of it. No, they're just appeasing you because they know they're about to take the place that you have so many memories. So, it. There are a lot of moving parts right now, but I bring up all the real estate because of Kennywood. And Kennywood right now and Palace Entertainment, they are not doing a solid by Six Flags Entertainment Corporation. So much so to the point that it's actually humorous to me. I don't know what's going on and why there is animosity somewhere between executives at the current Six Flags and executives at Palace Entertainment. But I cannot help but feel that the announcement that they are interested in going to explore selling all of their United States parks was done as a direct middle finger to Six Flags. And I say that because if you have an amusement park to sell and there are no amusement parks for sale, you can pretty much write your own check for what you're going to get, supply and demand. But when you have 5 parks to sell, and then one of your competitors says, we're willing to sell 13 of them, and we're willing to piece them off if necessary. We'll sell you 1 or 2. We'll sell you half of one. We don't care. Palace is... I have never seen what they're doing right now because they've given no information whatsoever. They've just pretty much said we're open for business. And then we get a Republican president into the White House in America, and that changes a lot of the financial outlook for a lot of people. I would have thought that after the election, because I thought that it was a lot of posturing at the moment, I would have felt that after the election, all of this Palace stuff would have went away. They would have made the announcement that they're going to continue with U.S. operations and a possible expansion and yada yada yada. But no, that did not happen. That did not happen, and that is why I talked to my buddy from J.P. Morgan, and he had given me a $250 million number for Kennywood, and he told me that that number is probably going to change drastically based on some news that's happening here locally, which is the county executive for Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is and where Kennywood is located. She is currently looking for a 45% property tax increase for Allegheny County. It's unprecedented. It's historic. It's insane. So let's put this little equation together. You're trying to sell a business that sits on land that's valued at roughly $150 to $200 million. And you now want to take a property tax hit of an additional 45%. So when you sell, you're inadvertently, if this passes, you're going to be telling every single buyer that you're going to have a 45% operational increase to purchase Kennywood. It's like it's a borderline deal breaker. But they still haven't made that announcement. They still haven't pulled this back. They still haven't said, "Oh, we were just kidding." So I think that's why we do have to look at the overall landscape. Um, it's very confusing because you hear that Merlin wants to continue expanding into the U.S., which Palace is a perfect opportunity for Merlin to be able to come in and buy these children's parks, Storyland up in New England, Idlewild, Dutch Wonderland. You can make half of them into Legolands, depending on the geographic location of them comparatively to the New York location. And then the others, they just made this really big pitch on this Minecraft stuff. So, I mean, call me crazy, but I feel like we're going to have a Minecraft independent kids park somewhere in the United States in the next 2 years. Not just its own land. It's going to be a Minecraft specific theme park. And I think it's a good idea. I think that Merlin is gutsy enough to do it. But the question is, what's for sale? How much is it going to cost people to buy it? And more importantly, is Six Flags a real estate company or a theme park company? So I just gave you about 5 solid minutes worth to unpack there. How do you feel in terms of the Palace sale, if that's going to take place? Where Merlin fits into that? Do you think they could have any interest in buying adult parks in the States? And if there is a park that's going to come in and buy a few of the underperforming, the Michigan's Adventures, that type of stuff, what parks are Six Flags willing to include to get a deal done? If they have to get rid of a good one, where do you think the line stops?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, the Merlin. I am a huge fan of like Alton Towers,
Yeah.
and I think Merlin is great in the European sphere. Personally, obviously, I know you'll be shocked if you followed me for a period of time, but I would love to see Merlin actually do something with the United Parks. Personally, I think that there's a small enough amount of them, and the DNA is close enough to what they're kind of doing over in Europe. Imagine Busch Gardens, Tampa, for instance, getting like a Jumanji themed section, kind of like they did at Chessington or whatever. So that would be my first pick. As far as Kennywood, that kind of strikes me as something that perhaps like a Herschend might be interested in, just from the classic sort of established identity that Kennywood has. It'd be a real shame if they just up and closed that park. As far as like Six Flags being interested in doing anything with that, I don't know. But
well, I definitely think the interest would be there, but yeah. I don't think the capital would be.
No, Kennywood's kind of an interesting one because it's obviously respected. It's a respected park, but I don't know if it would move the needle for Six Flags in the direction that they're currently looking to move it. I think more so what they're looking to do is perhaps get rid of every park that can't be converted into some kind of resort destination and then start from there. That's my personal take on it. Perhaps the parks that are sold off could come together and form a new company. Perhaps Six Flags would form a separate company and just kind of run their smaller tier parks under that. They kind of like split up. Perhaps that could be something. I mean, obviously you do have the issue of like, what do we do with Michigan's Adventure in Frontier City? You know, and Frontier City specifically, I think is a little underrated as a Six Flags park, but you know, you got
I
some
enjoy it.
coasters there. Yeah, it's great. But it's not going to fit into the mold that it seems like Six Flags is jumping into, which is the resort destination. So it's very clear, I think, in my brain, how it works is they are looking at, this is the Cedar Fair component. They're looking at Cedar Point and they're saying, how do we do that? But like over and over and over again. And to me, you know, it's kind of a tricky situation because, you know, Cedar Point has 150 plus years of history behind it. You know, it goes back to that word legacy that I brought up before. When you have a park like Cedar Point that has that legacy behind it and has that resort, it started out kind of as a beach resort. It already kind of had that momentum behind it. Then when you open Hotel Breakers, it's like, oh, well, this, you know, this makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, there has been rumors about the resorts coming to Six Flags Great Adventure. That was part of the reason why Green Lantern closed. So I'm never not going to do that. So that was, you know, part of the rumor there is that they're going to try something with a hotel or something there. It'll be interesting to see. Again, we're going off of like, well, maybe this will happen.
Right.
But really, I think personally, and this is just my take on it, I think whatever happened, I think Great Adventure will be the ultimate determination of what kind of park chain Six Flags is going to be for the next decade, I think. With everything that's coming there, I'm really, really curious as to what they do. If we get a shuttle spinner coaster in the plot of King Dakar, and that's it, man, I'm a little concerned with the future of Six Flags as a company. So, but
Are you not entertained?
right, if we get a mock striker coaster, you know, with multiple launches and it fills up that entire plot, plus a hotel, you're talking about a very different and aggressive company from what we've seen the last 20 or so years. Like no more of these silly flat rides, you know, that are a step above like what you'd see at a carnival. So I think everybody should watch Great Adventure. I think all eyes should be on that. Obviously, Cedar Point's going to make their decisions. Kings Island, Kings Dominion. I don't really think those are on Six Flags radar at the moment because those parks are great. They're going to print monies regardless. It's the Great Adventures. It's the Magic Mountains that I'm really interested in this next, you know, 5 to 10 years. You know, Knott's Berry Farm's kind of its own little thing, but it's got,
And I feel very similarly to you, how you are, you know, you said you really want to watch Great Adventure, and that's going to be your barometric pressure, if you will, as to what type of company this is going to be.
Right.
I am on a slightly different course. The two parks that I'm watching are Fiesta Texas and Kings Dominion, because the absolute number one competitor for whatever this new company thinks they are, I don't care what they think they are. they can only be in one place. So this is what they need to figure out, is how do we shoehorn ourselves here? And that here is they are the direct competition to United Parks. And they are attempting to become exactly what United Parks is attempting to become right now, which is Junior Universal. They are desperately trying to figure out how to get you to spend a second day, even if it means putting up this damn hotel. They are going to find a way to get you to stay at these big parks for more than one day. And SeaWorld right now, they're doing the exact same thing. You know, Orlando is getting that resort. They're going to have this unbelievably beautiful complex down there. And I mean, I will do it. I'll go. I'll spend a couple days. You know, me and the wife go hit up, go do Aquatica for a day, and you know, they have a little bit of everything down there. And you put a great world class resort for them. SeaWorld goes up. They elevate themselves, but the Busch Gardens parks, they're going to have the same problem that Six Flags is going to have. At least SeaWorld has the sea life, and that is incredibly time consuming for a family. And it's worth going back for, because the interaction with live animals is different every time. You can keep going back and back and back. That's why live animals were used in the first place, is because they create a different experience at every single encounter. So the bush parks have they have the flamingos, they have some birds, that kind of stuff, but they don't have the exact same feel within the park. It's very easy to navigate a SeaWorld park. It's very easy to, oh, well, there's a stadium right there. I guess that's probably where we're going to go sit down and watch the whales. You know, there's not much guesswork. And the parks aren't gigantically huge, except for San Antonio, which different story, different time. But they're all very easily navigable. And again, the Six Flags parks, they're going to have the same problem. How do we keep people entertained and engaged for a second day? And the reason that this ideology and this methodology, I fear, could potentially bankrupt them faster than they ever dreamed possible, is we've already went down this road. You remember Kings Island, Kings Dominion, all these places had campgrounds, had lodging all over them. Because, well, why wouldn't you want to go to Cincinnati or Doswell and go and spend a couple days and hit the park and maybe see a Cincinnati Reds game, or go, if you're in Doswell, go over and try to catch a Baltimore Oriole game. Guess what? Nobody did. Nobody did. And the only difference between today's world and that world is anything you want to do is 10 times more expensive today than what it was then. If anything, you're going to have less people doing multiple day stays at parks. The approach that these guys should have been taking was making every park the best value for what it was. Because when you're a value chain and you keep the name of a value chain, sorry guys, we already know what you are. I don't want to offend you and say it again, but you know, you can build 1,000 bridges, but you know, that's a very old adage, but it's very true. You know, they have to figure out a way to get people in the door for one day first before they start worrying about two. And when you are removing iconic roller coasters with no announcements, no warning, you are really jeopardizing people showing up for that first day. And, you know, I know at the end of the day, Jake, you and I, we're just dumb coaster lovers. You know, we put a video out from time to time and talk about this stuff, and you know, we don't know anything about anything, but we do know where we like to spend our own money. And to finish this video up, as we start to wrap up, that's going to be my final question to you, Jake. Are you purchasing a 2025 Six Flags season pass?
Well, that's a loaded question. I honestly have not. I pay for the Six Flags parks as they come up personally as I visit them. So for me, it's really just all a matter of, and I suppose now like Knott's Berry Farm is kind of in that brand, isn't it?
Yeah.
So for me personally, I don't I get the United Parks passes, of course, because they're like literally Busch Gardens is about 15 minutes, 20 minutes away from me. So that makes a lot of sense. And we go to SeaWorld all the time. But in terms
you
of
and I will
like,
you and I will be doing some Iron Gwazi here within the next 30 or 40 days. December and January is typically my sneak down to Tampa time.
That's right. That's right. You did hit me up last year for sure. But I will say Six Flags as a chain, I don't want to like be like controversial or anything, but it's kind of like when I see like, a McDonald's in like a hometown, it's like, dang, I don't want to wait for that really cool restaurant over there. But I always get like the same, quality at like a McDonald's. Like that's fine. That to me is kind of what a lot of Six Flags currently is right now in the industry. It's kind of like, well, we can just go to McDonald's, and I don't want to be like rude to Six
That's a
Flags.
great analogy. It's a great analogy.
Yeah, but that's kind of how I view like a pass. It's like I will visit Six Flags when I visit them. Like obviously I want to check out Top Thrill 2 and Siren's Curse. Obviously I love Knott's Berry Farm's Halloween event. I think it's the best in the country. I want to check out Rapterra, maybe Alpine Fury, but a lot of the Six Flags parks have not been on my radar for like a very long time because I got friggin' Epic Universe in my backyard. So I'm not paying attention to like what, any Six Flags America is doing. I couldn't tell you what Scrambler they added last year or anything like that. So in terms of like passes, it's probably a no from me, but I am me. And that's kind of like the thing. My personal take on like who Six Flags should be or what I look for in like an amusement park or something like that. I honestly, I forget Disney and Universal. They're kind of in their own separate universes, no pun intended. But for me, I kind of look to Dollywood as and somewhat Knott's Berry Farm, but Dollywood as to what a true theme park and all of these chains should be copying. Dollywood is inherently crafted and grafted in to its community, right? Dollywood is Tennessee. If you've ever been down there, everything down there in that particular area and the parks in general, not the parks, but the experiences and everything like that, it feels like Dollywood is grafted into its community. It's its own experience. It's
the
its
exact
own
same way that the exact same way that Silver Dollar City is with Branson.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, we've been talking too much.
Yeah, no, that is a great a great point that
Yeah.
those parks are they are ingrained. They are a part of that community, and I
And I
think
think that's
that
what Six Flags should aim to do is forget, the not the theming, but forget we're trying to make this area themed after the rainforest or something. We're not looking for that. What we're looking for is a high quality park that gives us some semblance of theme and identity with coasters and rides for all ages that make sense within that theme context. So Dollywood really, it doesn't have much to do with Dolly Parton if you've been there. There's
oh yeah,
like
no,
some areas that do, but Lightning Rod has nothing to do with Dolly Parton, but somehow it fits. It makes sense within the context of Dollywood. And I
agreed.
think for, Six Flags, this is where it's going to take a whole lot of work. And that's what I meant by resort destination. Because for them, for the next, 5 to 10 years, if you ask me, that's what I would be focused on. I'd say, how can we take these parks, Great Adventure, for instance, and really drill in to the parks and see where we can dig up some identity, some theme. And those are the things that we're going to keep around. And the things that don't fit that mold, the Harley Quinn spinner or whatever, then those things can go. So the majority of the things that they put in for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But the rest of the stuff, we really want to give each of these parks an identity so that and an identity outside of just a major coaster, which we think, King Ka, obviously, very important to the industry. But these parks need an identity outside of that. They each need to have their own DNA. That's why a Knott's Berry Farm doesn't feel right calling it a Six Flags park. There is a reason you don't feel right when you say that, right? There's a reason it feels kind of like, what? That doesn't make sense. There's a reason why you almost don't even want to call it a Cedar Fair park, right? It just is Knott's Berry Farm, right? And I think that really is the huge challenge. What the heck do you do with Magic Mountain? It's a smattering of coasters everywhere. It's great for us, but what do you do with a family in that park? And I do think that's
Buy
where
really comfortable shoes.
yeah, that is a mountainous park, but I think that's where the United parks have a bit of an upper hand in this regard.
I make no secret of it. United Parks it's my favorite chain, and I use chain very cautiously because Herschend, although they're a chain, they don't sell a pass like a chain. So I don't consider them a chain until they make all the parks attainable through one premium pass, which excuse me, they should have done probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
So, I would have to assume that that's coming. But even if you look at the passes right now for a premium pass for Six Flags, it's on par with what a premium all 12 park passport for United costs. You're talking between $350 and $400 a person, depending on the park and the location. And for me, for United, it's a bargain. It's an absolute steal. I feel like I'm cheating them by like the second month of the season. It's like, how are you not charging me more? This is amazing. The Cedar Fair Six Flags ones, I don't know. Me personally, I don't see the value. Now, it doesn't mean that I won't like try to pick up a cheap plus pass or something like that just so that we have admission for the 1 or 2 parks that we will eventually drive past. But, realistically, and I hate to admit this, but I had 12 visits to Cedar Point this year. 12. In those 12 visits, we ate 10 meals, and we rode maybe 14 rides in the 12 visits. 4 of my stops at Cedar Point this year, we stopped for dinner. And then we left. I didn't even use my free skip the line pass to go, and because there is no such thing at Cedar Point. I have this premium product, and then I want to go ride Maverick, but my skip the line only puts me to a 35-minute wait. Or if I want to take that and go to Steel Vengeance, I'm still waiting 40 minutes. Or, so we found very little value in some of the top tier um, Six Flags parks this season. And I think that value is going to be even more limited next season, because I have the feeling that we're also going to be battling poor operations and understaffing because of financial crunching, which is going to make it even less enjoyable for me, at least. Um, but we know that we have, SeaWorld and Busch Gardens. And, for me, like you said, you have them very close. I am within 20 minutes of 2 different airports that fly directly into both airports, Orlando and Tampa and San Antonio, all 3, and San Diego. And I live 6 hours from Williamsburg, which I make that drive multiple times a year. It's one of my favorite places to be in the entire country. Busch Gardens Williamsburg is awesome. I love that park. It's really hard for me to have a bad day there. It really is. I went a couple years ago and Pantheon was closed, Apollo's Chariot was closed, Alpengeist was closed, and my wife said, I am so sorry. You are just going to be so. I said, nope, Verbolten's open. I'll just come find me in like 4 hours. And it was like a 25 ride of Verbolten day. There's so much to do in that park besides just ride the big roller coasters that, it's awesome. It's awesome. But any final thoughts? Any closing words of wisdom?
No, I'm just interested in what Six Flags does with King Ka. I'm interested in what happens with Magic Mountain, and I'm interested in just kind of their strategy over the next 5 to 10 years. Do they decide to go back on everything that they've been pursuing for the last decade, or do they try to bridge the gap between the two? Do we have a world where Harley Quinn's Spinsanity is juxtaposed with a really interesting B&M Giga that's really well themed and a hotel in the backdrop? They're going to have to thread the needle somewhere, and I'm just really interested in where they thread the needle.
Now, if they do go your route, I personally don't think that they can keep any more than 8 or 10 parks.
And personally, I don't think they need more than 8 or 10 parks. I think
I agree with you.
All the successful, it's interesting because if you look at Disney, for instance, really, how many United States parks do they have? How many resorts? 2. Right? And they are a massive global thing. Obviously they have a massive media empire behind them.
Right.
Universal as well. But even if we boil it down to more Herschend, we've mentioned them a couple of times. How many parks do they have? 3? And then some other smaller experiences. So I think for Six Flags to regain some of its legacy, to use the word again, some parks are going to have to shut down, but it's parks that have been trashed over the last decade, just trying to put in a premier ride Skyrocket 2 just to get maybe a couple more thousand people through the turnstiles for that season. Really, right. Six Flags have been ran season to season. and that needs to
Mhm.
stop. And
I agree with you.
they need to start looking at building an identity for each park. And I think it will be really interesting to see if they are able to do that.
It is going to be very interesting to see what happens. And, for everything that we talked about tonight, it's all just guesswork. It's all speculation until, like you said, we really start to see some proof is in the pudding moments of where is this capital being spent. Are they getting rid of these parks? Are they going to pare down to 8, 9, 10 mega properties that they are going to try to, uh, you know, draw every possible dollar out of the consumer at those 8 locations, much like Disney and Universal. And I'm not saying that, that it's the wrong move, but, there are other people that are actively reaching for every penny. So,
Sure.
yeah, if they are successful in the United States market, can the roller coaster and theme park community as a whole, can they survive with 2 luxury brands, 4 upper echelon brands, and no budget brands? Is the US a market that can survive without a budget theme park brand? And that's a question, Salim, I think you should have asked yourself that probably 2 years ago. And it's
Yeah.
not always about numbers. It's not always about dollars and cents.
Right.
Sometimes it's about common sense. It's common sense and being able to ask yourself honest questions. Because when you look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day, you have to like what's looking back at you. And if you're sitting at 30 some properties, 7 of them aren't profitable, 3 of them are leased. 1 is held on emphyteutic rights through the Canadian government. It's like, how many things are we going to stack on top here to muddy the water? But man, I'm going to love watching it happen, because if they fail, I will be there to roast them with marshmallows and sticks, the whole 9 yards. If they succeed, I will be there spending my money. And if it just falls somewhere in the middle, then you and I will probably be in here talking about what they need to do to make it better.
Right. Well, I certainly hope they don't fail, because that would be the death of a great American amusement park company. So I certainly am hoping that they can get it together. And same with the United Parks. I know you're trying to wrap up, but I'm hoping the United Parks, they really have to discover themselves again, and kind of figure out again what they want to be, because the market has changed. And really, I am a Universal fanboy. So I'll admit that straight out. But Universal has really kind of churned up the market in a way that I think these other parks are trying to figure out, well, gosh, do we want to go after that IP driven nonsense, or do we want to be regional parks? And if we want to be regional parks, well, then how do we do that while working with the budgets that we have? And again, Dollywood's right there. Copy the homework, man. Like,
Yeah.
I think, in the future, it's going to be interesting, because they have to do work on Six Flags has to do work on the guest experience first and foremost. And a lot of that stuff takes a lot of capital and doesn't have a whole lot of immediate returns. So with shareholders breathing down your neck, United Parks are held captive by a predatory investment firm right now. So I'm
Mhm.
kind of a little bit forgiving of them. But in terms of Six Flags, with these shareholders breathing down your neck, are you willing to step in front of them and say, we're taking some time to really rethink our guest experience? Because with Americans and what we're after, it's not just about getting on a Ferris wheel. It's about what is that Ferris wheel's context within the theme of the overall environment? And what are you giving me that I can't get elsewhere is kind of the thing. And if the answer is nothing, then people
That
don't
is,
spend their money, you know?
yeah,
I'm
that
not
is the
spending
question, is
money on
what type of
yeah,
unique experience can I provide? And I
exactly.
think that there is a unique experience that can be provided by Six Flags. I just personally believe that they're choosing the wrong one. The experience that I believe that they should have chased is the amazing family day. And what I mean by that is, one, to make it affordable, two, to make it inclusive, that you do have rides and attractions to engage with every member of the family, and three, that you give them next level operations. Because when you give that, it's amazing how easily a little bit of crappy theming can be smoothed over. Because there is one thing Disney and Universal will never provide their customers, and that's a speedy process. And it's the only thing that Six Flags could have dominated. Dominated. And all they had to do was say, hey, we're not going to theme anything anymore. We're going to overstaff the park. It's going to be the cleanest you've ever seen. We're going to offer good, healthy family food options at an affordable price. We're going to include free parking with every pass. We are going to get you in the door. And if they can deliver on that experience, the perception of what the consumer wants will then change, because psychologically speaking, you crave what you can't have, but you do what you can afford. And that's just the reality. I spend my time when I'm just hanging out on the Porsche website. I'm not buying a Porsche this year. You know, I went out, I bought my $50,000 WRX 2 years ago and bought exactly what I wanted. And when the guy said, why are you spending that kind of money on a WRX? I said, because I can't afford the Porsche. And he laughed and he understood. You know, my brother, he's an attorney. He's had his Porsches, but he's happy driving a Honda now because he knows what he likes. It has nothing to do with trying to keep up with the Joneses for a lot of the consumers. It's just about what can we afford. And again, I think that they lost sight of, it's great to want to try and compete with the big boys, but when you're leaving such a market segment where you were the only game in town, you know, you would have to do a lot to mess it up if you were going to just try to improve from status quo for a couple of years until the market maybe settled down, the financial world settled down a little bit. We didn't know what type of inflation was going to be crippling economies all over the globe. And you know, that's not a political statement. That's just a realistic statement that, you know, money makes the world churn. And if you can't borrow any, it's going to be tough to make park investments. And if you owe too much to creditors and you can't pay bills, you're going to go bankrupt. And it is a dangerous proposition, man. It is a dangerous proposition. I will say, all these guys that pushed this through to make this merger happen, oh my God, Jake, I feel for them so bad because these guys are not sleeping at all. There's no way they're sleeping at night. With the amount of pressure that is looming over the heads of these guys with every decision they make. I mean, I remember what it was like pre-pandemic managing money, you know, managing people's money for individuals, for small business. We're talking about astronomically sized business, and hundreds of thousands of investors' money. Yeah, I don't know how they do it. They're better men than I, because I would probably resign just because of the stress. But at any rate, I know we have went probably at least 10 minutes too long. We always like to try and keep the PaRC After Dark ones, the late night, the long drug out one-on-one conversations to about an hour. We didn't do that bad. We're sitting at about an hour 10.
Yeah,
And
10 minutes. I think I've earned that, you know? It's a time
yeah,
change or whatever.
and I'm going to be honest, 10 minutes at Universal Studios, that doesn't exist anywhere. Everything's at least an hour. So, I feel like the 10 minutes we're doing good. We're doing good. I don't know if I've even got a drink refill at Universal in 10 minutes. It's just, I love the park. It's a great experience, but my God, you have to have patience.
Well, do
Definitely.
stay and scream for Halloween Horror Nights, and you will see a 10-minute wait once in your life at Universal.
I'm gonna make an admission. I have never been to Hollywood Horror Nights. I just
Well, it looks like we're done here.
Yeah.
Dude, you have to go to Halloween Horror Nights.
This year is going to be a priority. I do want to go. For Halloween this year, there were a few parks in the Midwest that we did not get, and ultimately, I'm super happy we decided to go on that trip, because it's what gave us the ability to get out and ride Lobby Bora before it got killed. Honestly, I was probably one of the last 4 operating days on Lobby Bora, and I got to have 2 days where I think it was just the ride team and a couple of enthusiasts that knew the ride wasn't going to be there anymore. And by the second night of me and the same 6 people showing up constantly, they were like, "Oh, you guys know that this is," or like, "Yeah, obviously, why else would we be coming to ride this Intamin / Giovanola bobsled?" But
Ryan let us know. So
yeah, it's honestly,
Halloween Horror Nights, gotta do it. You gotta let me know when you're going.
Yeah, no, this upcoming October, we will definitely be down there. I think I'm going to try to bring the kids down with me as well. They love that kind of stuff, and our oldest daughter, she is anytime that we go to Florida, it's yes, please. So she just loves an excuse to come down and get into the nice weather.
Hurricanes and all.
Hurricanes and all. Hey, I lived down there for almost a decade as a Hollywood, Florida boy, and I've lived through a handful of hurricanes and tropical storms, and they are not that fun. But
they're not.
I got to tell you, the first time that you go through a hurricane party with locals, one of the greatest and most memorable experiences of my entire life.
Definitely.
Even to the point that for the second hurricane, I was kind of fired up for the hurricane party. It's like you know that all of your stuff could possibly be destroyed and your life could even be taken, but you're like, yeah, but in 3 hours, we're going to grill 80 pounds of meat and drink 43 cases of beer between the 80 people that are here. And happy Floridaing.
I love it.
Yeah, I do miss Florida from time to time, I got to tell you. But guys, thanks for hanging in with us for this long. If you did, if you didn't, I don't think either Jake or I are going to blame you. But he will be back at some point next week to do another guest hit with us. And we do appreciate you. Thanks, and until next time, guys, we'll see you out there.